Start?
Yeah, you want to start. You want to start Jim's Law. I mean, you want to start from 135. I put the verses here.
Yeah. They said submission Islam, Abraham's religion. They said you have to be Jewish or Christian to be guided. Say we follow the religion of Abraham, monotheism. He never was an idol worshiper. No distinction among God's messengers. 2:136 say we believe in God and what was sent down to us and what was sent down to Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, and the patriarchs, and what was given to Moses and Jesus and all the prophets from their Lord. We make no distinction among any of them. To him alone we are submitters. If they believe as you do, then they are guided. But if they turn away, then they are in opposition. God will spare you their opposition. He is the hearer, the omniscient. Such is God's system, and whose system is better than God's? Him alone we worship. Say, do you argue with us about God when He is our Lord and your Lord? We are responsible for our deeds, and you are responsible for your deeds. Him alone we are devoted. You say that Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, and the patriarchs were Jewish or Christian? Say, do you know better than God? Who is more evil than one who conceals a testimony he has learned from God? God is never unaware of anything you do. That was a community from the past. They are responsible for what they earned, and you are responsible for what you earned. You are not answerable for anything they did. In the footnote for 2135 says the Quran repeatedly informs us that submission is the religion of Abraham. 395, 4125, 6161, 2278. Abraham received the practical scripture, namely all the duties and practices of submission, the contact per salat, obligatory charity, zakat, fasting, Ramadan, Hajj. Muhammad was a follower of Abraham's religion, as we see in 16123. He delivered this final testament of the Quran, the third messenger of submission, delivered the proof of authenticity.
So, okay, can I make a comment?
Of course.
So this is actually really interesting because this is something I didn't know about. I was always confused on what it means to be messengers of submission. Now I feel like I got it for the first time. Like it literally just clicked because this is in Appendix 26, I guess. Talks about three messengers of submission, and now I got it because the way it works is the religion starts like all the practices in terms of the name of submission, right? The religion practices, rites, rituals starts with Abraham. Then Muhammad brings the scripture. Then Rashad comes and brings the proof. That's literally the sequence for these three. So, because sometimes I'm saying, well, wasn't Jesus a messenger of submission? And he practiced submission, but he was not a messenger like of submission in the way that we're describing here. The next issue is that in 2135, it talks about Abraham's religion. So, that's the question: is why doesn't it say, Abraham's religion monotheism? Why doesn't it say Adam's religion monotheism? Obviously, Adam was monotheist. Noah was monotheist. So obviously, I have an answer to this, but I just want to get your guys' response as to why is it saying Abraham's religion and not anyone else's?
Because I think that Adam didn't has things like zakat or praying or etc. like this stuff. But like the Abraham has this stuff. Abraham has this stuff like zakat, praying, and many other things like that, and fasting too. So I think this is why it's called a regulation, but not Abraham's. I couldn't explain that well. I'm so sorry.
I think you did a good job.
Yeah, mashallah.
Someone else want to elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, so all the rights given to us in the religion, they all came from Abraham. So it's like when Muhammad was told to follow the religion of Abraham, that basically encompasses all the rights of Abraham. But when it comes to the laws, we basically revert to the Quran. Someone brought up the question regarding did Siam fasting come from Abraham? And if we go to 2187, we see that fasting was something that was instituted even prior to the revelation of the Quran. It says, permitted for you sexual intercourse with your wives during the nights of fasting. They are keepers of your secrets, and you are keepers of their secrets. God knew that you used to betray your souls, and he has redeemed you and has pardoned you. So henceforth you may have intercourse with them, seeking what God has permitted for you. So it's showing that this is, again, something that's in practice. And the month of Ramadan has been around, prior to the revelation of the Quran. But this was something that was constituted. It just happens that on the night of destiny was the night where the Quran was revealed to the prophet. But it was something that's been in existence even prior.
Can I comment on the? That's a really good point, because that's the question is during Ramadan. Ramadan came from Sayyam, is the fasting during time of Abraham. He brought all the 5 pillars of Islam. The question was about 2136. This is my understanding, is that it says, we believe in what was sent down to Abraham, Ismail, Isaac, Jacob, and the patriarchs. So my understanding is the patriarchs are the children of Jacob. And what's interesting is the order that it mentions here, if that's consistent with the Arabic, is Abraham is the father of Ismail and Isaac in that order. So Ismail comes first, then Isaac. Jacob is the son of Isaac, and then the patriarchs are the 12 sons of Jacob, which include Joseph. That's why Joseph is not distinct from the patriarchs in the Quran, in the verses. That's the way I understand it. And then it gives Moses and Jesus, obviously that's their order. And then it says all the prophets from their Lord, so it includes the rest. But that's just the way I understand it, Katerina.
I would say we can't say definitively if it's all 12 sons, but from these 12 sons, you have 12 tribes. Was it, each member within the tribe had a messenger, or was it the actual 12 sons? It doesn't specify. So I would be apprehensive to make that jump.
But that's like the traditional understanding, right? In Christianity and in Judaism.
Not necessarily, because if you read the Bible of it, basically it says like the fate of some of the. I mean, it has some really twisted stuff regarding the righteousness of some of the sons. But nevertheless, I mean, we do know that they unanimously agreed to throw Joseph into the well. So.
Oh, except Benjamin, because he was too young.
Yeah. But to say that they are definitively the 12 patriarchs, I would be apprehensive to be 100% on that claim. It's similar to, was Shoaib and the father-in-law of Moses the same person? We have some indication of it, but to say definitively, I think it's there's a leap of faith.
So, okay, but there was a previous claim that Abraham and his sons are the patriarchs. This verse makes clear that that's not the case.
Yeah,
we can establish that much for sure.
Okay.
Let's see. So, but we know for a fact that Joseph did have 12 sons. Now you're saying, okay, we can debate whether, yeah, exactly. Jacob had the 12 sons, and Joseph, and then Benjamin is the last son. So the image I put is the 12 sons. And I don't know if you guys, this is actually really cool. It's kind of a side note, but there is a TV series on the story of Joseph, and it's pretty good for being made from non-submitters. It's pretty consistent with the Quran. It's the highest quality, like biblical or Quranic kind of production from the Middle East. It's the story of Joseph, and it's really good. And if there's subtitles, I would recommend everyone to watch it. It's really awesome because it goes through his story from the beginning and all the sons and all the endeavors. And it's literally the whole chapter of Joseph is just the whole Quran. It's a really fascinating story. But anyway, Benjamin is the last son. think he's younger than Joseph. So, but yeah, I put the image of Jacob and then his, I guess, 4 wives, or yeah, and then the sons from each, basically. So she's asking about the verse of the 12 tribes. So is this the case? Yeah, okay, we got that. Oh, that's a good point. Okay, I get what you're saying. But Peter, one thing that's interesting though is that, like I said, Joseph is never mentioned with, like, separate from the patriarchs. So I feel like he was included with them.
I would believe so, but the question is, was it his immediate brothers, or did each tribe, in essence, end up having a messenger? Because
And
there
yeah,
isn't, it's not to say that all 12 were simultaneous, right? Doesn't
and
give that there was 12 patriarchs.
it makes sense that we know that when Joseph returns, his family comes to him to Egypt, and he's in Egypt. About a couple hundred years later, that's when the whole children of Israel thing happens with Moses. So it's a couple hundred years later. So you think, these 12 brothers all have their own families for like 200, 300 years, then that would coincide with 7 160, and then also 512, I suppose.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's also 260.
Okay. So anyone have any other questions about the verses we read? We read from 2:135 to 2:141. Because the other verse I read about patriarchs, I was always wondering, okay, maybe this is just this is Abraham and his sons, but this verse makes it very clear. The other one seems it's a little bit more ambiguous. So check this out. 4163. Look. Every time, and look at this, look at this. It is Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, the patriarchs, and then it jumps to Jesus, Job, Jonah, Aaron, and Solomon. Obviously, this order is not appropriate. It's not correct, because if that's in the Arabic, because Job was at the same time of Abraham. So we know that. But we do know that Abraham, Ismail, like these guys are all like a lineage. So maybe it's showing a lineage first, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
Actually, that makes sense. Well, we know that Jesus is the same lineage as Jacob and the patriarchs, right? So that's a whole line of lineage. Is that correct?
Jesus was from David. That's the understanding that he was lineage of David. So you have David, Solomon.
Actually, isn't Jesus from a virgin mother, which would exclude him being from a patriarch?
If the lineage, okay, so basically from the lineage of the father, that's why they say Jesus was the start of a new movement, because he didn't have the paternal lineage. But Mary, on the other hand, we know that her descendants comes from Aaron, so she was of the children of Israel. It's actually interesting, historically, biblically, it would follow the path of the father, and then in modern times they switched it. I don't know the motivation behind it. They say, "Oh, if you're Jewish, if your mother's Jewish."
Yeah, I've heard about that. Okay, so all right. So I read these. Go ahead.
I got a comment about 139. Just the last sentence is, "To him alone we are devoted." There's this person, I'm drawing a blank on their name, but someone like linked up to their video, and I've seen it posted other places too. She's a Arab speaker, like semi-Quranist, but what's interesting is her tagline is, she says, "I'm my own you are your own savior," but she uses this the literal Arabic is you are devoted to yourself, which I think is very funny because it like literally contradicts the verses of the Quran that we're supposed to be devoted to God alone. She's basically telling people to be devoted to themselves. Um, I thought that was funny because it's the same word, mukhlisun, which means someone who's like exclusive.
Hmm. So, question about, let's see. Question about 2140. What do we see this? Who is more evil than one who conceals the testimony he has learned from God? So, what is this test? What kind of testimony can this be? What do you guys think?
I think the especially when you study the Bible and then the Jewish commentary on it, that there's a lot they conceal
Hmm.
because they don't want to give it any credence that oh this was of importance or significance. So any mention of Hajj pilgrimage for the most part has been kind of like taken out. Any reference to a salat has been taken out. There's a prominent Jewish rabbi that basically said, yeah, you know, we intentionally kind of like cover those aspects because we don't want to have any we don't want to create any uh, um, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, credence, like any kind of authority towards the Quran. I want to say that this is something fringe, has nothing to do with Jewish faith. It's completely separate. Validity, that's the word I was looking for.
Hmm.
But you also see it in traditional Muslims. Like they literally will twist the translations to try to extract meanings that are contrary to what is actually stated in the Quran. So when it says like when God,
Also,
oh good,
sorry. No, go ahead. Please finish. Oh, I just go ahead and finish that thought.
Yeah, it's just like in 39:45 says when God alone is mentioned, the hearts of those who do not believe in the hereafter shrink with aversion, but when others are mentioned, they rejoice. What they typically do, they'll say when God, the one and only, is mentioned. So they'll like twist the translation to try to you know not call out their hypocrisy.
Just like the Bible, all over the place, doing the same thing with God alone. I did a study of the Bible where I went and searched for the words God alone in every English translation. And it's there's quite a few actually if you add them all up from all the different translations, which shows you that it could have been translated God alone, but they choose to translate it in a different way. But the thing I was going to add about the Quran, I mean about what the Jews conceal is, for example, the prophecy of Muhammad and also the prophecy of the messenger of the covenant.
Hmm.
They see the like they explain the messenger of the covenant, and which is really clear. It's a prophecy, but they say they take it and twist it to say that it's already there. That I think that he had already come. You know, even though it's clearly talking about a prophecy.
Hmm.
So, Katerina posed a question about do we have any examples of submitters concealing a testimony? I can think of a couple where you know we're having a discussion on some point, and people will intentionally try to hide or obscure facts that they've had to not strengthen the other side. And this is actually in the verse. I think we read it last week. It says, "Do not inform the believers of what you find, lest it strengthens their argument." So you see people do that where they're sitting on information, they're intentionally not sharing it, or you know, trying to uh, distort it in order so people don't use it against them.
And I think one thing she's asking about is how, like, what is that? How is that a testimony, I guess? Like, what's a testimony? Hmm.
This is the verse. This is, and when they meet the believers, they say, "We believe," but when they get together with each other, they say, "Do not inform the believers of the information given to you by God, lest you provide them with support for their argument concerning your Lord. Do you not understand?" I can think of it. Let's say let's say you have an understanding, and you know that it forms contradictions, but you, in essence, don't disclose those contradictions because you're more interested in being right. As believers, we should always be searching for the truth. If it contradicts something that we understand or know to be true, we should put a magnifying glass on that. Try to understand, okay, where are we wrong? How can we better ourselves? Because once we're arguing for the sake of being right, then we're just trying to please our egos.
So, all right. So I had a comment real quick about the whole Joseph thing. This is really interesting. Joseph's only mentioned twice outside of his chapter by name. Isn't that fascinating? So he's mentioned one time in chapter 6:84, which is listing a bunch of prophets actually, and then one time he just mentioned about the person when they said that he's going to be the last messenger. That's it. And then it looks like basically everywhere else he's just included with the patriarchs and not mentioned by name. But I had a question about this. Are we saying that the patriarchs were all prophets? Is that appropriate or accurate?
It's not clear. It doesn't. It doesn't indicate, as far as I know. I'd have to look at the verses, but I don't recall that it. It might actually, if it's in source. I got to just look at the verses if it calls them as part of the prophets or not.
No, there's a book called The Lost Books of the Bible, and there we can see that the 12 patriarchs had left a testimony. I haven't read it yet, but it's similar, but not similar, but it's like the testimony that Jacob left. They have left testimonies as well, apparently. According
Okay,
to
so yeah, sorry. So I think 4:163 proves that they're prophets. Do you guys agree? So check this out. So I think these are all prophets, right? Because it says we inspired you as we inspired Noah and the prophets after him. And we inspired Abraham, Ismail, Isaac, Jacob, the patriarchs, Jesus, Jonah, Aaron, and Solomon, and we gave David the Psalms. And the context is all scripture and prophets in this verse. What do you guys think? That's the way I'm looking at it.
I just read the next two verses though.
Oh, messengers we told you about, messengers we didn't tell you about. Yeah.
I mean, we don't have to jump to a conclusion. We can just do some homework and then see what we did.
Yeah, because we know all prophets are automatically messengers, but it's just interesting because the verse itself mentions prophets. So I thought maybe that means that this verse itself is talking about prophets, but yeah, maybe it's not. I don't know. But I have heard about the 12 books of the patriarchs. Like that's a real thing that I've heard about. Okay, so Katarina, did you get your answer regarding the
Hey, look at
messenger?
this.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Look at this. This is really interesting. Because God had taken a covenant from the children of Israel, right? Okay, so it's basically defining the children of Israel. It says, and we raised among them 12 patriarchs.
Yeah, I saw that. I was going to ask about it. So does that mean that you're right? So that means that these are like, this is like hundreds of years after Joseph, basically?
God knows. I mean, it doesn't specify.
But wait a minute. Yeah, but hold on a second. Hold on a second. The children of Israel are just Abraham or Jacob's sons. We know this, right?
Correct, yeah, but it says, and we raised among them, so the them would be the children of Israel, 12 patriarchs. But, I mean, it could be construed in the sense where it's like a separate, but God knows. I mean, it could be argued both ways. I'm just saying, I
Yeah.
haven't seen enough definitive evidence to call it one way or the other.
I guess okay. So, but the question, yeah, but you agree with me that Joseph is definitely one of the patriarchs.
I would believe so, but again, unless I can say definitively, it's like I would say, I'm leaning in that direction, but I can't say definitively. If were you gonna make a comment?
Well, at first I was going back to the 12 tribes and the water, that the water gushed forth for the 12 tribes, but I guess you don't need to assume that the patriarchs come from the 12 tribes. Yeah.
Okay. Should I load more verses? Does anyone have any more questions?
I'll make another comment just in the sense of this concept of Jewish or Christian or even Islam, which is really interesting. So it says, you have to be Jewish or Christian to be guided. They're claiming that, Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, the patriarchs were Jewish or Christian, except, none of these terms existed at that time. What's interesting is the word that God in Arabic describes Christians is from the same word as helpers. That's why it says, "Who are my God? Who are my supporters with God?" They say, "We are God's supporters." This is where the word Nasra, which means Christian in Arabic, comes from. Jewish comes from one of the sons of Jacob,
Yeah,
Judah,
Judah. Yeah, Judah.
and this is where the term Jewish comes from. It's like it's silly to say Moses called himself Jewish, or or even that Jesus called himself Christian. Christian actually it's Greek for Christoph, which means Messiah, right? Like the literal translation would be like we are Messiahs. But again, this isn't something that Jesus himself would have called his followers. This is something that came after the fact. Like one of the funny things is in Christianity, they say, Jesus was bearing his cross like before being crucified. It's like, wait, did that happen after the crucifixion? So it's like they take these terms that have signified meaning post facto and then they apply them before. Same thing with the concept of Trinity. For 381 years after Jesus, that word did not exist. As part of the Christian faith. It wasn't until I believe the Second Council of Nicaea where they basically officially came up with the Trinity doctrine.
I loaded additional verses. I'll be back, inshallah.
It's worth looking at it's interesting where these phrases and words come from. Like, why did God choose these words, or why did people choose these words? When you look at Muslim, right? The root of it is Islam. Islam can mean peace or it can mean submission. And when you add a meme, M sound at the beginning of it, it means a person who possesses that quality. So a person who submits to the will of God would be a submitter. When you look at Jewish, the term Yahud, I'll look it up. Means so the root of it is to be guided. and then someone who turns in repentance. And then if you look at Israel, Israel means someone who's wrestling with God, but not in the sense of how do you put it? It's more in the sense of being tested and wrestling in that sense, not in the the negative way. Except some people obviously do that. But it's interesting when you think of these words when God applies this. He gives these people the names, or he allows them to take on these nouns to describe themselves. Like the significance there. Do we? Anyone else got any comments or questions, or should we keep reading? Make one last comment just from the verses we read in 141. It says they are not responsible for what they earn, and you are not responsible for what they earned. There's always this tendency where people in essence are so overtly concerned with what other people are doing or what they did and how they conducted themselves, and at the end of the day it's like, look, we're not going to care at all what happened to other people. We're only going to be cared about, responsible for our own necks. There's this over infatuation with kind of like, how people conducted themselves in the past, and then we're supposed to be responsible for it. And you see this with a lot of these like guilt projects where people are said to be held responsible for what their grandparents, their ancient grandparents have done, and they want atonements and they want restitution. And to me, I think it's like that's a really wrong approach, because you go far back enough in anyone's lineage, you're going to find things that you don't like, and those people aren't around to be held accountable for it. To hold someone else accountable for it, it seems like a sense of injustice. Someone want to read the next series of verses from?
I think if we just to wrap it up, God willing, the term, you explained the term Christian.
Mhm.
Mashallah, that's a very good one. I didn't link that one before. Regarding the term Jewish, like you said, it didn't exist back in the day of Abraham. The name Jew, when the children of Israel had their own land, after a certain period, the country was divided in two, Israel was basically divided into Israel and Yehuda, and then because of the tribe of Judah, which was the king tribe, the kingly tribe, right? So we had Israel and Yehuda, and then Israel was conquered because of its sins, and only Yehuda remained, and that's where the Jew come from. The term Jew is from Yehuda. Very interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just want to wrap that up.
Mashallah. Would you want to read the next set of verses? From
Yeah, sure.
142 to 48.
From where?
142 to 148.
I try with my Flemish accent. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Abolition of bigotry and prejudice. The fools among the people would say, why did they change the direction of their Qibla? Say, to God belongs the east and the west. He guides whoever wills in a straight path. We thus made you an impartial community, that you may serve as witnesses among the people, and the messenger serves as a witness among you. We changed the direction of your original Qibla only to distinguish those among you who readily follow the messenger from those who would turn back on their heels. It was a difficult test, but not for those who are guided by God. God never puts your worship to waste. God is compassionate towards the people, most merciful. Qibla restored to Mecca. We have seen you turning your face about the sky, searching for the right direction. We now assign a Qibla that is pleasing to you. Henceforth, you shall turn your face towards the sacred masjid. Wherever you may be, all of you shall turn your faces towards it. Those who received the previous scripture know that this is the truth from their Lord. God is never unaware of anything they do. Even if you show the followers of the scripture every kind of miracle, they will not follow your Qibla, nor shall you follow their Qibla. They do not even follow each other's Qibla. If you acquiesce to their wishes after the knowledge that has come to you, you will belong with the transgressors. Abuse of the scripture, selective emphasis, and concealment. Those who receive the scripture recognize the truth herein, as they recognize their own children, yet some of them conceal the truth knowingly. This is the truth from your Lord. Do not harbor any doubt. Each of you chooses the direction to follow. You shall race towards righteousness. Wherever you may be, God will summon you all. God is omnipotent. The footnote says, Qibla is the direction one faces during the contact prayer salat. When Gabriel conveyed to Muhammad the command to face Jerusalem instead of Mecca, the hypocrites were exposed. The Arabs were strongly prejudiced in favor of the Kaaba as their Qibla. Only the true believers were able to overcome their prejudices. They readily obeyed the messenger.
Inshallah. Any thoughts or comments from what you read, Erdan?
Yeah, I think the first thing that stands out to me right now is that when we obey the messenger, there will be what do you call it? Factors that will make people drop out and expose the true believers. That's the first thing I noticed. How about you?
Mashallah, it's like you see this theme in this surah where consistently it's like people have accepted the messenger, but then when it comes to the actual commandments, that's where they fall short. What I think is funny is, most people don't make the claim. They're like, oh, yeah, wholeheartedly done anything the messenger told me. I wouldn't have objected. Sure enough, we're all going to be put to that situation to some extent. And it's just interesting to see how quick people just buckle under pressure. And one of the big ones is just social pressure. When everyone in a community is like going one way or pressuring you to do something else, are you going to side with the verses of the Quran, or are you going to go with the social pressure, the group to not follow through? Because inevitably we see that it's always the small select few who are steadfast, who basically do the commandments as prescribed. Anyone else have comments or thoughts or questions about what we read?
Salam. So the chronological order is like the Qibla was toward the Kaaba, and then it got changed to Jerusalem, and then it got changed back to the Kaaba. Is it like that?
Correct, yeah. What's interesting is God doesn't specify in the verses exactly the history. If you talk to traditionalists, they'll say the opposite. And then you talk to some Quranists, they'll tell you that it's like, oh no, it's some completely different location. Which is always interesting that certain aspects of the Quran God didn't put in. My take for that is that it's not pertinent for the lesson we're supposed to take. Concept is that God gave the messenger this clear commandment that, hey, you're going to change the direction. For a lot of people, it was just too much. They said, forget this. This guy's like, falling off the deep end. We're not going to do this. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And it showed that they didn't, the lack of faith they had.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound like far away though.
Oh,
Are you talking through a tunnel?
yeah.
You got one of those like gift wrap You're scaring
You know,
Monica. She's very concerned.
All right.
are you going to say,
It
right?
wasn't connected
Okay,
properly. How
please.
about now? Is that good?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, yeah, I just had a comment about this on the this whole thing about the Qibla issue. So basically, the Prophet, in whatever way, indicated to them, like the Hadith says that, okay, he just changed his direction in the middle of prayer. Okay, maybe he did that, or maybe he told them, or whatever. And in whatever way, he made it very clear to them that they have to pray towards Jerusalem, right? So then the question is that this is kind of the question, right? We have like a rebuttal for Quranists because they always say, well, we can't accept anything from anyone unless we find in the Quran. Okay, so it's like there's no verse for this. So then how do you know this is right? If you're with Muhammad, then I'm assuming people will say, well, show me the verse. If you don't show me the verse in the Quran, then we're not going to obey you. And well, he doesn't really have a verse. So then what are you supposed to do? And I think this is an example to show us the importance of obedience of the messenger. So we just have to obey the messenger sometimes. I mean, pretty much always, but like sometimes it's not even obvious to us, otherwise. So I see this as a pretty good example for this kind of thing, but I don't know what you guys think about this.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's in Quran, Hadith, and Islam, right? There's a translation 4822 that Rashad is emphasizing something, and he uses the expression. He says the obeying the messenger is conditional, and it says in obeying your righteous orders, meaning that if the messenger gave you an unrighteous order, it's your commandment not to follow him, right? And some people they say, well, look, this makes everything that the messenger said subject, meaning that we have to confirm. But if you look at the stuff that people end up bickering and complaining about, it has nothing to do with righteousness in the sense that it's like this is something that's going to cause you, go and harm these other people or go and do this sinful act. Always something, or in essence, it's like, look, go and sacrifice a heifer. What do you mean? Why do I have to do it? Which one? Right? This has nothing to do with go and cause harm or damage or destruction to someone else. Something that could be questionably sinful. I think that's that's what it's getting at when it says in obeying your righteous orders. It means that look, the messenger is never going to ask you to do something that's unrighteous. If you interpret what the messenger said as doing something unrighteous, then you probably misheard him, and it's probably better you don't do it. The concept is when he gives you a commandment saying, look, you're supposed to go and sacrifice a heifer. Look, you're not supposed to drink from the stream unless it's a single sip. Hey, you're supposed to go through this gate. These kind of things aren't something that is by any way sinful, like even can be perceived as sinful. Therefore, our obligation is, yes, we hear and we obey, we do it. But if someone interpreted that, so say, for instance, like in Surah 2, verse 54, where they translate, they say that Moses told the children of Israel to go and kill themselves, say, well, look, that's not a righteous order. I don't understand it, so I'm not going to follow it. Right? That's the mentality we should have in the sense when we're saying, like, look, the messenger's commandments are conditional. It means that if it's pushing us to do something that we know is sinful, then we have to stop and say, okay, what's going on?
What is yeah, I feel like that's a slippery slope though, right? Because then you say, well, I use my own logic and judgment to determine what he's saying is sinful. For example, he says something is good or he says something is bad, and then my logic tells me it's the opposite. So
He's
how do we
not
deal with that?
It's what I'm getting at. He's not asking you to commit sin, right? It's like if you look at every single one of these commandments that the messengers give, like these examples we have in the Quran, literally at most you can say it's a matter of opinion. Nothing, in essence, is being construed to be sinful. And if you have the understanding that the messenger is telling you to go and commit adultery, go and kill someone, go and do these heinous acts, it's at that point that you say, okay, look, this contradicts the whole premise that the messenger is only giving righteous orders. Let me investigate and see what the heck is going on. What's funny is people, they over extrapolate this to every single commandment. That if the messenger of God is saying, look, this is the way we do salat. Wait, how do I know if that he's telling the truth? Maybe he's lying. Maybe he's mistaken. It's like this has nothing to do with sinful conduct. He's literally giving you instructions. And I see it's like what ends up happening is people over extrapolate this concept of 48:22 when it says obey your righteous orders, that they say anything the messenger says is subject to being disobeyed.
May I input on this comment? The
Yeah.
so in let's see, audio on Quran Study 39, about 1 hour and 9 minutes in, there's a discussion about Surah 24, verse 54, and it says, say, say, obey God and obey the messenger. If they refuse, then he is responsible for his obligations, and you are responsible for your obligations. If you obey him, you will be guided. The sole duty of the messenger is to be delivered. Is to deliver the message. So this discussion went like this. She said, the girl says, if you say something that is wrong and I follow you, what does that mean? And he says, basically, he said, yes, if you obey the messenger, then you have done your duty. If I'm wrong, that's my problem. That's what he says. He talks about that your duty is to obey the messenger. The messenger's duty is to give you the message. If he gives you something wrong, that's on him. And he said that will be an excuse with God on the judgment day. If God says, he uses the example of, why did you think that when people die at the age of 40, that they go to heaven? And the person would answer, well, because that's what God's messenger told me. And that will be an excuse, even if it were wrong. That's what he explains.
I see these kind of concepts where it's like it's a null hypothesis. The messengers wouldn't command something that in essence was unrighteous, even if they did, right? It's like similar to when God says God does not have a son, but even if he had a son, I would still be God's utmost worshiper, right? That you create these caveats that even in this impossible scenario, basically it still nullifies the argument. David, were you going to make a comment?
No, I just put the updated translation, but I think it conveys the same meaning, exactly what you're saying. It's just nor disobey your righteous orders. And the whole concept is the messenger of God is not going to give orders that are unrighteous or cause you to hurt yourself or commit sins or go against God's teachings. That just doesn't make sense. It goes against what we learn in the Quran.
Sadly, there was someone recently, she basically killed her child. And she claimed that, oh, God told me to do this. I don't know if she's trying to claim insanity or what. The concept is like, well, look, God is never going to advocate vice. So if you interpreted something as sinful and destructive, then, you need to have the common sense to be like, okay, maybe I'm misunderstanding something.
Is it?
I just, sorry,
Yeah, go ahead.
no, thank
Is it possible for could a messenger, like for example Muhammad or whoever, like could they possibly, is it possible for them to give an unrighteous order in the first place? Like, oh, do adultery or kill this person. Like, is it possible for them to do so?
It's interesting. God calls it out in the Quran in Surah, here, I'll give you an example, 66:1. It says, "O you prophet, why do you prohibit what God has made lawful for you just to please your wives? God is forgiver, merciful." That if they did do such a thing, that God corrects the situation. This is part of the mechanism. So here we have the prophet. It doesn't specify what it is that he prohibited, but he did something. He advocated a prohibition that wasn't authorized by God in the Quran, and for that he's being called out for. The messenger errs in some regard, which they do. God corrects the situation. But because at the end they're human beings. Like we have the other example of Zayd, It says you hid inside yourself what you were supposed to declare. Here, let me pull up the verse.
I got it up.
And 37.
I got them up because I got the subtitle.
Okay. No believing man or believing woman, if God and his messenger issue any command, has any choice regarding that command. Anyone who disobeys God and his messenger has gone far astray. What's interesting is here, Muhammad the man was obligated to follow what God was telling him. And he failed in that sense. This is, recall you said to the one who was blessed by God and blessed by you, keep your wife and reverence God. And it says, and you hid inside yourself what God wished to proclaim. Thus, you feared the people when you were supposed to fear only God. Zayd was completely through with his wife. We had you marry her in order to establish the precedent that a man may marry the divorced wife of his adopted son. God's command shall be done. So here we have another example where again the messenger he failed to adequately deliver the message because he was fearful of what the people would think of such a commandment, and because of that, God called him out and again fixed the situation. Even if the messenger was to give a unrighteous or an inaccurate account, that God would fix the situation. Otherwise, it's in the Quran that if he does that, if he taught any other teachings, if he basically refused to do his obligation, that God would have cut the revelations from him. He would have cut him from the aorta. No one would be able to help him. So, there's very severe consequences if someone actively is a prophet or messenger of God and, tries to go astray. We have the example of even Jonah. He refused to carry through with his mission, and they had the fish swallow him. And it wasn't until he repented and reformed that he was basically put on shore and then allowed to carry through with his duty.
Oh, okay. And what if somebody like follows, what if the messenger gives an unrighteous order and somebody follows it? Would they be held accountable?
Yeah, but at the same time, part of the mechanism is that they would be corrected in it. Meaning, like, say, 66:1, where we have the prophet, giving an unrighteous order, or in 33:37, where he's telling his adopted son, keep your wife and reverence God. Immediately, God corrects the situation. So, if someone was hypothetically to get a unrighteous order, that, if they're deserving of it, God will correct the situation.
Okay, thank you.
So we have a few minutes left. Can we just finish up these Qibla verses?
We read to 48,
No.
148.
I mean to 51 or 53 is where it finishes up these Qibla verses. Okay, I just loaded them.
Anyone care to read? Joe, Harris, E, Nancy, Dina, Monica,
Which verses are they?
149 through 153.
Okay, I can read inshallah.
Okay, thank you. Or in VC1 chat.
You'll hear me or?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Wherever you go, you shall turn your face towards the sacred masjid. This is the truth from your Lord. God is never unaware of anything you all do. Wherever you go, you shall turn your face towards the sacred masjid. Wherever you might be, you shall turn your faces towards it. Thus the people will have no argument against you except the transgressors among them. Do not fear them, and fear me instead. I will then perfect my blessings upon you, that you may be guided. Such as the sending of a messenger from among you to recite our revelations to you, purify you, teach you the scripture and wisdom, and teach you what you never knew. You shall remember me, that I may remember you, and be thankful to me, and do not be unappreciative. O you who believe, seek help through steadfastness and the contact prayers. God is with those who steadfastly persevere. Is that where you want to stop?
Yeah, perfect. Any comments or questions about the verses?
To get back to the thing so I can mute myself.
If anyone has any comments or questions from... Go ahead, Jeff.
It's just this. It's this continuing theme of obeying the messenger. It continues because 2:151 he's talking about such as the sending of a messenger from among you to recite our revelations to you, purify you, teach you the scripture and wisdom, and teach you what you never knew. And that's what I see. Dr. Khalifa, he taught us so much Quranic information. And there were also a lot of rulings and commands that he did. And I wonder if we're actually obeying all of them. Are we carrying out? Are we his supporter? Do we do this? Because this is a blessing. I wonder if we leave some of the blessings aside because we are hesitant or this kind of thing.
I think
one. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jeff. Finish your point.
Well, one in particular I brought up last week was, what I still see happening is this conflating with the term Islam with submitter. And I don't know if it's just me, but I just see that there was a clear instruction to pull the rug out from underneath Satan by saying that Islam is not a name. It's not the name of this religion. It's submitter or whatever language you're speaking. And because I find that we're conflated with Islam, and I personally feel an absolute break. I was a Muslim. I did follow Islam, but I never say that now. It's submitter, and it is nothing of the same because I just see that was Satan. That's Satan's religion. That's how I see it. I believe that the submitter's perspective of what was it, October of 1989, or whenever the name change happened.
September. I paid.
So, yeah, September. Yeah. I mean, I see that as clear as night and day, but yet I just see this continued.
Was there a dispute about it recently?
No, not at all. No, I just see that it's always conflated that we use Islam interchangeably here, when I don't know if that's the intent.
Right.
It's not.
No,
you know what I'm saying?
He says pull the rug under Satan's feet. So that's not going to be done anymore. So we understand that we're focusing on the name of our religion, which is submission, and we're submitters. And this is the major component of the universal unification process, right, of all believers, is the name of our religion. And so we can thus be united as submitters to God, from all backgrounds and different whatever creeds that we grew up with.
I don't know why we're still arguing this issue about the name. It's really not that important.
It's actually very important.
No.
Was
there a dispute? Was there actually a dispute about this 20 years ago?
I don't know if there's a dispute. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes there are people. I don't see anyone here that's disputing it, but there has been
talked about it. Yeah, we talked about it before. If you have people
Yeah, I
who
don't
only
know,
speak
but
Arabic, they'll say Islam, right? If you have people who speak
yeah,
English, they'll say submitter, right? I mean, that's
right,
how I see it.
right. But I don't think you should. I don't know if you're taking this. I don't think you should take it towards you, Joe. Like it's not anything
Oh
directed
no,
at you.
yeah, for sure. I feel like it's just, we're beyond just the name.
Yeah, it's good. I just want to read the footnote of 2149. It says a glaring proof of the idolatry committed by today's Muslims is the designation of Muhammad's tomb as a sacred masjid. The Quran mentions only one sacred masjid. What's interesting is even in the hadith of the traditionalists, it says that God has condemned and cursed the Jews and Christians for turning the tombs of their prophets into shrines or into places of worship, masjids. Which is funny because they literally, we've talked about this, I know with you, Cho, like they basically turned his place of death into a place of worship, which just doesn't make any sense, right? We just don't do that. It doesn't seem appropriate to me, but I want to know what other people think about this right now.
Got a separate comment on 152. It says, "You shall remember me, that I may remember you, and be thankful to me. Do not be unappreciative." Um, it's interesting. If we forget God, we ultimately forget ourselves. There's other verses in the Quran. It says, "They forgot us, so He made them forget themselves." If you think about it, if you say your whole life, if someone says, "Hey, how long is your life?" They think about only the years that they're on this planet. They don't contemplate the eternity they're going to be here for all of the rest of eternity in the hereafter. If you're only thinking about this, what God describes as what's going to seem like part of a day, rather than your whole eternity, you legitimately have forgot yourself. Um, and that's something. It's like by remembering God, by being conscientious that we're going to be returned to our Creator, that we're going to be held accountable for our deeds, actually helps us to remember who we really are. And what else is interesting? It says, "And be thankful to me. Do not be unappreciative." This concept of being unappreciative in this verse specifically, it uses the word kafirun, which is also a disbeliever. So if someone is a disbeliever, they disbelieve in God, what they're ultimately doing is being unappreciative. They're being not thankful for God for all the infinite number of blessings that they've been given. And it's interesting that these two concepts of disbelief and unappreciation are synonymous. It's like, a submitter, we submit to the will of God, and if we don't, then we're objectors. We're people who complain and bicker and are only seeing the downside of everything. And by doing so, we just fail to acknowledge all the, again, infinite number of blessings that God has given us.
So is this the verse you were referring to, 7:17?
Yeah.
No, it's
Yeah.
a different verse, right? Not this one.
What, as far as Kafirun with
Yeah,
unappreciative? It's in
yeah.
217, 2152.
Okay, so not this one then.
It says, you'll see it throughout the Quran where it's like sometimes it's translated as unappreciative because that's one of the criteria of the disbelievers, that they're unappreciative.
Oh, that's a good point.
There's another just interesting fact in this surah. So Surah 2 has 286 verses in it, right? What's 286 divided by 2? One? A little bit of math.
148.
143.
Oh, 143. Yeah, right.
If you look at verse 143, it says, "We made you an impartial community," and the literal Arabic is wasat, which means middle. So the middle verse of this longest surah in the Quran, God is basically saying we made you a middle community, an impartial, neutral community. This level of structure that's in the Quran is really, it's a testament that every single word, verse, surah has been divinely orchestrated. That, this surah, for instance, the number of times that Allah is mentioned in Surah 2, the multiple of 19, the fact that it's at 286 verses, that the halfway verse, again, to verse 143 is mentioning the middle, right? So you see these clues throughout the Quran that every single facet of it, there's some deeper level of design. That these verses aren't arbitrarily just selected, these words aren't arbitrarily like picked and choose, but they're done so in some deliberate fashion.
Yeah, that's a really good point because a lot of times people assume that the Arabic has a very specific meaning that can be conveyed in English easily, and that's not the case because there's limitations to the English language, and we know anyone who's bilingual knows that. I mean, even if you're not bilingual, you just might know that if there are certain phrases, words, expressions that cannot be really even translated. You can make an attempt, but you're really not able to convey the full meaning. And Messenger of Covenant talks about this many times that he's trying to do it. He's doing his best of conveying the meaning, but there's just certain words that don't emphasize the level of seriousness or powerfulness or strength of the Arabic word that's being used. And so it's just it's the closest or the best that we can have when it comes to the English.
Here's like an interesting, so we read 2454. Jeff called this out, right? It's if you'll obey him, you will be guided. When we think of the context of obey in English, it seems authoritarian. What's interesting is the root for obey in Arabic, tayu, is basically also means doing something voluntarily. Meaning that this is different than, say, for instance, obeying by force. And we were talking about this yesterday, like the word Islam, the root of it also has the meaning of peace. So this is not to be construed with someone forcing, compulsion or subjecting someone to a religion. It's something that people choose freely on their own volition. The expression "let go and let God."
MashaAllah, that's a good one. The obey, yeah, it's kind of distasteful in our culture. This notion of obey, it's really distasteful. So, but I think it also speaks to just our society here. I think we would learn a lot to obey, But anyway, I wanted to say that, I mean, I can't ignore also the sayings where the messenger says that you don't need to translate it for yourself. He says that. And he also says that he says things like the Arabs would learn from the English version because they've lost the meaning of a lot of the words, this kind of a thing. He says these things. And he also says things like, this is the Quran meant for the world. The way he has it, right? After his translation is revealed, he says those things. So I just wanted to see how you work that out.
That's a good point, Jeff. I think that's accurate. And look, I made this example. We look at Shakespearean English. It was from how long ago? 600 years ago, let's say. And there's a lot of words there that mean different things today, or we don't even really fully understand or comprehend. That's 600 years ago. We're talking about, and that's the English language. We're talking about, which, by the way, English language is very well documented. There's encyclopedias, there's dictionaries, there's literature, there's the printing press that came a little bit after that, around that time, right? We're talking about the Arabic language from not 600 years ago, 1,400 years ago, in the dark ages, in the middle of the desert, and so you get these native Arabic speakers coming today. So I speak Arabic. I understand the Quran. It's like, no, you don't. You think about the word gay in English. 100 years ago, it means something else. Just 100 years. All these words in Arabic. They have different meanings. They have different contexts. They have connotations, idioms, expressions, phrases. this is a fundamentally different thing. This was the argument we're having last night about this discussion is like, yeah, you need to spend your whole life studying not studying the Quran. I take that back. Translating the Quran. It's like it's one thing to translate the Quran and figure out what it says. Another thing to actually obey it, right? If I have to spend my whole life to even just figure out what it's even saying on basic principles, basic terms, then that's a problem. And I just don't believe that's God's religion. I just don't believe that God's religion is so difficult that I expect someone, in their 50s in China has to spend 40 years to learn Arabic to be able to even understand some basic, coherent, issues in the Quran. That's not God's message that I understand. It's not complicated. Shouldn't be that complicated. So, this just endless, we're talking about the most mundane, basic things. Like yesterday, we're having a 2-hour discussion about Shahada. If we even have a Shahada, what is the Shahada? We're not even allowed to say Shahada. It's like, that's not even getting into like the multiple meaning verses, allegorical verses. We have to be really careful. Like, what are we doing? What are we focused on? And when you go down this Quranist path, you could justify anything. Someone was saying, marijuana is okay to smoke. Homosexuality can be okay. Someone else is saying something, other things. It's an endless rabbit hole that really ends up with nothing. We have to be very careful. And there's nothing wrong with studying the Arabic. We study the Arabic every day and we learn things from it all the time. But if we want to take that to the extreme and basically extrapolate whatever we want, then that becomes a problem.
I would just say that to me, the more guided you would be, you would come up with the same translation as Dr. Khalifa did, in my opinion. I don't know. I keep thinking to myself, you look at history and you just see, I've said this before, that right after Jesus died, it exploded, and there's so many different Christianities. Right after Muhammad died, we got all these hadith, and within 38 years, there's verses added to the Quran and division and war, and I see, why would that tendency not happen to our generation?
So, if I may, right now, for everyone that came, salam alaikum to everybody. So, we read the Quran. Now we have an open discussion about the verses. Does anyone have any Quranic questions? They want to ask a topic in the Quran or ask something about a verse or some issue in their life relating to our religion?
I got a verse.
What's your question? Or what's your verse?
It's just a verse.
Go for it.
Yeah, let me just see what. Hopefully this is the right verse if I can remember. Oh, nope, wrong verse. Hold on. Gotta find it.
If you tell me what you're looking for, I can help you.
Hold on. I'm very close. Maybe I'm one verse off. Okay, it is, hold on. Here we go. Okay, DC 1. You read that out?
Yeah. To each community, a messenger. After their messenger comes, they are judged equitably without the least injustice.
Yeah, so I see in a lot of translations, they say like for every nation there comes a messenger. And I'm just trying to see like, is there a time frame to this, or is it every nation of any time?
Yeah, I mean, how are you going to define nation, though? I feel like that's problematic. We learn in the Quran that God says there's messengers He tells us about, and there's messengers He doesn't tell us about, and also there's obviously, commissioned messengers or uncommissioned messengers. For example, you can have God's message you share with your parents or your relatives or whatever. But I think this coincides with a natural instinct that we all have in the Quran to basically worship God alone. This is a natural instinct. So you actually have to go against your natural instinct. I just put the verse 30:30. It says, therefore you shall devote yourself to the religion of strict monotheism. Such is the natural instinct planted in the people by God. Such creation of God will never change. This is the perfect religion, but most people do not know. So basically, this is basically telling us that it's a natural instinct to worship God alone. If you do other than that, if you follow polytheism, meaning multiple gods, you're going against your natural instinct and you're developing a tendency that is unnatural.
Yeah, I know that, but I'm just in regards to the verse. It says to each community there's a messenger. How, in what sense is this to every nation? Does it include today and in the future, or is it specific to a time?
I'll give my 2 cents regarding this. Um, the concept of ummah, right, could be as small as, say, a community, a congregation, but it could also constitute an entire nation. Today, we have the Quran as a message to the entire world. So, in essence, this becomes, the warning, the message for the world. I mean, pretty much in any language right now, everyone has access to this. With internet and just the resources we have, it's at the literally fingertips of every single human being on this planet. So, when it says every community receives a messenger, meaning that there isn't going to be a community who's not in one shape, way, or form another get the message of worship God alone. Obviously, God says in the Quran in 5:48 that each community, they're responsible for the revelations given to them. And that we don't know these obscure tribes from thousands of years ago, take the Mayans or the Aztecs, what message was given to them. But God is assuring us that every single community did receive some warner, some messenger.
Okay, and what about for the future? Will there also be, or is it basically finished? And now it's all up to kind of who takes in this message and accepts
Yeah.
it.
And God knows. God knows how that's going to be orchestrated. But the reality is, um, is that we trust in God's system. There's the expression in Surah 20, where I think it's 20, not 14, where Pharaoh asked Moses, says, "What about the past generations?" Says, "The knowledge thereof is with my Lord. My Lord never errs, nor does he." What is it? But yeah, so in essence, it's like this is something that God is accounted for.
I think even 1049 talks about each community.
Also, the videotape for the 1988 conference, he addresses this specifically. He talks exactly about this. If you want to look into that deeper, but anybody,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hold on. Go ahead.
I'm sorry,
Each
please. I
community
was finished.
each community has a predetermined lifespan. Like the word community here, is it just talking about what type of community are we talking about here?
It's tough because, say, for instance, it says no communities to return except for Gog and Magog, right? So it's like the question as far as what constitutes a community is, I think, more open-ended than what we signify. So, say, for instance, even if we say it's a nation, it seems to go beyond that. If we say that it's a community like a congregation, well, it could be beyond that as well. So it's like, it's one of these things that is kind of open for interpretation. But
But
yeah,
but
go
don't we
ahead.
see don't we see in the Quran that nation and community are used kind of differently?
Same
There's
word.
well, are they really the same word? Is it just
Yeah,
one Arabic word and then it's either nation or
yeah.
community?
Ummah.
Ah, okay. Oh, okay. Then I
You'll
see
have
where.
city, you'll have group, right? You'll have these different things, but the word ummah, you'll see it, signified as a community, as a nation. Um, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, it's not as cut and dry that this is what the confines of it is.
Okay, so I would just say that the context would play a role in determining kind of whether it's talking about an overall nation, right, or kind of like a minuscule community.
Thy X is they X. They X. Can you talk? Got a question about, or they have a question about.
They, AX.
Okay. He's asking about the counts. Basically, what I did is I took the for instance, you take the which one common manuscript of the Quran today. And the thing is, when it comes to Aleph, there's variations. Even if you grab, like, say, the Hafs manuscript of the Quran today, you see variations in which words, how many Alephs they contain. I did is I basically went and created a kind of a list of all the variations for any given word, then went through the ancient manuscripts and wanted to see, okay, how is it spelt there? Could I find it in these various variations? Then I took the printout from Computer Speaks for Rashad's counts of Alif Lam Mim, Alif Lam Ra, Alif Lam Mim Sad, Alif Lam Ra Sad, um, and sorry, Alif Lam Mim Ra. And what I did is I wanted to see if I could match Rashad's counts. So if I was to make a change, like, say, not a change, if I was to go with one spelling over some other spelling, what I wanted to do is two things. One is to make sure that I was being consistent for that occurrence of that root in all its derivatives throughout the entire Quran. So I'm not just like selecting, oh, this one verse, I'm going to write it with one less aleph for this one word or one more aleph. I wanted to have a consistent pattern. And then, so I applied across the entire Quran for every single derivative of that root. And then I also went and pulled ancient manuscripts. So basically, I'm talking about like the first 200 years from the Quran before the introduction of the vowels, the diacritics, and validated that it was also spelt in some manuscripts in that style. And so I basically worked backwards to try to replicate exactly Rashad's counts. And for the total counts, I'm able to get all the same total counts as Rashad for all the Aleph surahs. This comes with a contingency. The thing is, again, it becomes highly debatable because there's any number of permutations you could do to replicate Rashad's counts. Question is, the one I did, I tried to do it would have the least amount of deviation from a verse to verse count as what Rashad had. But the downside with that is, like, who's to say that that's the official? That's the whole reason that I haven't published anything, because I don't want to give, and I've seen this happen with submission.org. So submission.org was the counts that are there are from Atif, which is Rashad's brother, and he was basically trying to replicate Rashad's counts. And he got to a point where he got brain cancer, actually passed, but he wanted to get the counts to some closure. What he did is he made the aggregate counts of their respective surahs as multiples of 19. And his intention, just from, I know people who know him, who knew him firsthand, was not that these were going to be the final official, sealed counts. But after he published them, that's what people did, is they treated these as if these counts that submission.org said were divine, and they're the authorized, counts authorized by God, which I don't believe Atif's intention ever was for that. So my thought is, it's like, if I publish something like this, individuals are going to be like, "Oh, this is the definitive count," and part of that is just because their lack of understanding of the whole pitfalls of counting aleph in the Arabic language.
Mashallah.
Yeah, and this is like it's not. This is something I've been working on for years to get there. And by no means do I think that it's like, oh, this is done. God willing, I got a lot more years left, and I'm going to continue, God willing, working on it, trying to figure out, like, is there a way where you can make it definitive, where in essence there's no ambiguity to why certain alephs are counted or certain spellings are used over other ones. So he says, did you make a note of the discrepancies with Rashad's counts? Yeah, so I did. I have that old document. I just haven't publicly published anything, just because I still consider it a work in progress. To replicate Rashad's counts is not a challenging thing. The challenge is, how do you, whatever count you come up with. So say, for instance, the alephs you choose to spell in a certain way. The justifications, why should it be spelt that way, not another way? That's where the real challenge comes, because if I wanted to just replicate his total counts, I could do that in a heartbeat. I mean, as it stands today, Surah 2, 286, there's 9,899 alephs. If you take the most common manuscript of the Quran today, you're only off by one aleph, if I'm not mistaken. So it's almost perfect, right? So then the question is, okay, which one aleph is a deviation? And you think about it, you have some thousands of words there, and then from that, let's say, dozens of words that could potentially have one more or less aleph. How do you know that one that you picked to go with a different spelling? That's the one that should be the one that should be altered.
Hey, Peter, do you have any discrepancies with the history of the lineage of the Hafs Quran that came through the Egyptians in the early 19th or 20th century, as it is explained on the submission.org site? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I mean,
It,
honestly, when it comes to a lot of the history, to me, it's like we're working with inaccurate information. I know there's like some other sites that have shown like, hey, these are variations between the halves and the warsh, and these other um, uh, girat recitations of the Quran. What's funny is even amongst the halves, like I can show you today, the halves Quran. You go pick two halves Qurans. Like this has to do. So Surah 11 and Surah 30 shots counts of lam are off by one from what you see in most Hafs Qurans, okay? And people say, look, this is proof he was wrong, blah, blah, blah. I could show you today, pick two Hafs Qurans. Half of them are going to spell two words with one extra lam than the other one, okay? Meaning that even in these surahs, there are places where, in essence, if you removed a lam, you would have no impact on the meaning, no impact, like minor impact on the recitation. But the challenge is, again, if you were to do that, you have to have some sort of justification. Why did you, change this one, how this word is spelt to reduce it by one lam? That's the part that, in essence, it becomes problematic. But it's just funny, people have this perception that, all these Qurans, when it comes to the vowels, right? That they're all consistent. And it's like even today in the manuscripts, you'll see slight variations. It doesn't impact the meaning. It slightly might impact the recitation, but most of the tajweed is basically, it's indistinguishable. I mean, say for instance, if I tell you blue, B-L-U-E, or blue, B-L-E-W, right? The pronunciations of those are the same, but the spellings are different. So it's like these changes, it doesn't change the meaning, it's just the aspect. It's like, look, you could spell it with two lams or one. You could spell it with three lams or two. And then same thing with the aleph. It's like some of these alephs, they're vowels, where they're not a counted letter. And then some of them are actual consonants. That discussion as far as when it's a vowel and when it's a consonant, there's debate around it. Some of the letters, like the alephs, they have to be there because they impact the meaning. You have a number of these, in any given surah, words where the aleph, it's debatable. Is it a consonant or is it a vowel?
Right. To me, that raises a question, though. It raises a question of preservation. If we look at the meaning can be the same, but obviously the spelling, the words can be different. In regards to the claim being made of the Quran being preserved, do we look at it as being the message that's preserved or the
But
Arabic text?
Joe,
That means
that's what we were talking about last night, right? Like we believe the actual text is preserved. So that's why when we ask Quranists, which is the correct Quran, if you don't believe in Code 19, you have nothing to stand on. You ask the traditionalists, they say all the versions are correct. They say God revealed like 15 versions to Muhammad at the same time, which is not logical. It doesn't make sense. And God calls the Quran being safe and protected in a master tablet, meaning there's one document of the Quran, one manuscript. But
then
obviously, we believe that there is one version of the Quran that's correct, not 14 versions. So there is one correct edition, and it's not just the message that's preserved; it's the actual text that's preserved by the specific letter.
But for us to see this for us to see this correct Quran, we had to have Rashad Khalifa come and fix it, which means it wasn't preserved until he came and corrected it. So
Well,
therefore,
no, it's preserved. Well,
preservation.
hold on. It's
You know what I mean?
preserved. It's preserved because it exists. He just identified it for us.
I'll give an example. So let's say, for instance, someone says, "Hey, I have a legitimate painting from Leonardo not DiCaprio, Da Vinci," and everyone looks at it, they're marveled by it, and then someone realizes, "Hey, you know what? there's some additions that people have added to this, and we're just going to remove those, right? The painting is always preserved. The painting is always there. What the Quran's mathematical structure does is it basically purifies it of any kind of like alterations or distortions that were made. This is part of the process. So say for instance like Yasin, Surah 36, you can pick up any Quran right now and you'll get various counts of the numbers of ya's in there. Why? Because y is also vowel and the consonant. We know from the mathematical miracle which ones should be counted, right? And it's like in essence, most of the Qurans will have a deficit of ya's, even though they're actually there. So this in essence helps us clarify. Okay, this is the correct spelling of these words. But we're going through the Quran, applying this process. When it comes to say, for instance, like what's another example? Again, yeah, lam. So you'll see some Qurans again. Today's modern day manuscripts of the Qurans, some words they'll have an extra lam in there, and we can tell from the mathematical miracle, okay, hey, these lams they should be, they need to be removed, and this is the function. So if I send an encrypted message and I give you a public key, what that public key allows you to do is to remove any, identify and then ultimately remove any distortions or alterations to the message, the original message I sent you. The Quran's mathematical structure operates in the same way. Challenge is when it comes to the Aleph, my take is it's like, look, we have enough there to say that, okay, this is preserved. Challenge is now we need a way of, how do you put it? Kind of another layer on top to be able to say, okay, this specific spelling across the Quran has to be this one. I think we just have to be patient, in the sense where it's like we're happy, we're content with what we have. It reduces down from 13 qirat down to one. But I don't think that it's over. Like it's not like okay, hey, everything is said and done. Like there's still more to this story.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I was going to open. Does anyone have any other Quranic questions? So there's close to 19 people here. Does anyone have any questions about Quran in their lives, or religion, or practices, or worship, or any Quranic topic that is confusing or problematic for you? I just want to utilize the time if anyone wants to talk about any particular issue when it comes to Quranic topics.
yo, is they X new in here?
The who?
They X?
Yeah, they're here. They just don't talk, but they can hear us.
Might be like another fake
What's your,
account.
what's your name? I feel like it's just
Yeah, what's your name, Vayex?
Yeah, you don't have to get a person's name.
you have to send you need to screen or you have to send us your birth certificate, all your information, social security number. We need to verify you. Make sure
Social
you're
Security. Cho, do you have any questions? Do you have any Quranic questions, bro? Anything you're going through?
I mean, I've been going through the same thing for the longest time, How do I follow this religion the right way? I mean, that's just
Yeah.
it's in my head. It's always in my head.
Some answers last night about the prayer, the contact prayers?
Huh?
Did you get some answers last night about how to do salat and how it doesn't make sense if it's just
Yeah.
anything you want?
We agreed on that a while ago.
So you agree on the
God.
salat 100%?
I think it makes the most sense. I think it's the most logical. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yep.
All right.
I could
Anyone
be
else
wrong,
have it?
but
Yeah.
I could
Anyone
be
else?
confused. I don't know.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying. I mean, at the end of the day, there's always a possibility that I could be wrong in what I believe. But it just makes sense to me, right?
Sister Katerina had a question earlier. I don't know if she can hear me about the lineage of prophets from Adam or messengers from Adam, and I gave like kind of a lineage through Abraham and Isaac. Did you get your answer for that issue? Katerina, did you get your answer about the messengers? Do you understand the sequence, the chronological sequence of messengers? So you asked about it's Adam, and then like Enoch, and then Noah, or Adam, Idris, Noah, Hud, Saleh, Abraham, and then you can go to Ismail to Muhammad, or you can go Isaac to Jacob to Joseph to Moses to David, Solomon, Jesus. Is that kind of Okay, yeah, I kind of wrote I wrote an incomplete list, but yeah, I can get more for you compiled if you like, if you want to just know about these people. Yeah, God bless you.
Cheater, what did you send? What is that?
All the things she said, all the things she said, running through my.
News.
You know what's interesting is there's certain prophets and messengers we really don't know historically like what time. Like one of the big questions, when was Job? It doesn't have a time period. It doesn't have a reference. It doesn't have a lineage. You know, same thing with like say Luqman. Luqman, it's just it does not even indicate that he's a prophet or messenger. He's just a righteous individual. Yeah, what time, what period, and I feel like for some of these histories, the importance of that is that it transcends time. This is something that could happen today, or it could have happened thousands of years ago, and the takeaway of it is one and the same.
Speaking about time, I got a completely random question. Is it okay if I ask it?
Cho, before you ask your question, we had a special verse delivered to you by Katerina. Yeah, this is
Oh.
specialized for you. 42:13. He decreed for you the same religion same religion decreed for Noah, and we inspired to you, and we decreed for Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. You shall uphold this one religion and do not divide it. The idol worshippers will greatly resent what you invite them to do. God redeems to himself whomever he wills. He guides to himself only those who totally submit.
Yeah, that's a nice verse. It was a good verse.
Mashallah.
I'm just honestly like you like walk around and you observe and you just like observe the world and everyone who inhabits it and you just see so much difference, even who people claim they believe in the same belief as you, but you see things are so different in regards to belief and the following, and it just like we're divided. I mean, regardless of what we say our religion is, we're divided, and I just feel like it's kind of hard, you know. I would say like there's no consistency among the different groups of submitters or Muslims around the world, because I'd say each group, or depending on where they are in the world, they do something different, whether it's something fundamental based or just kind of like a branch. I don't know.
To me, that is exactly the reason why it's so valuable to have a guiding teacher, the messenger of the covenant, who said, "Do it like this." And if we all do it like that, then we're good. That's how I see it. I just see that unifying our practices is very, very important.
Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, there's always going to be a dispute about what's the right way to come together and follow something, like what's the right way to do something. There's always going to be an opposition group to everything.
And they may be right, and I might be wrong.
Exactly, and that's why we should never say we're 100% guaranteed that what we're following is the truth. There should always be a small percentage that, okay, there's a possibility that we can be wrong, but we have overwhelming evidence to support the contrary, or support what we believe,
Yeah, last week, actually, I shared a video from Milton Friedman where he was talking about that, the Good Samaritan. Can you force somebody to do a good deed? Make a law that you have to save somebody if you can. These kinds of things. This idea of knowing for sure something, that when it comes to freedom and individual liberty, the truth is you can't know you're 100% right. There's at least some element. I mean, we can say, well, no, it's been proven to us, the Quran, we know it, but there's some element that we have to be open to our own humility, of our own lack of omnipotence, if you know, and therefore that means you can't force something on somebody else, because you can't know that you're 100% right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's where I am like, so I'm sitting right now, you know. If I accept Rashad and I take Rashad 100%, what if I'm hit with something that's like that goes against, you know, basically Rashad as a messenger, and then like that is overwhelming and basically, you know, persuasive enough to like where okay, hold on, this seems right too. And then I'm in this like situation. Okay, well, there's these two different things. They're opposite to one another, but both are convincing. You know, what route do I take? Which is correct, which isn't. Like,
Cho,
I feel
I
like
just put a
go ahead.
I just put a couple of verses for you. They're both in chapter 8, 39.
39.
It says, "They are the ones who examine all words and follow the best."
Yeah.
These are the ones whom God has guided. These are the ones who possess intelligence. And then 39:55 says, "And follow the best path that is pointed out for you by your Lord before the retribution overtakes you suddenly when you least expect it." So the idea is that um, if this is the best path that you're currently realizing, then that's the best. And we always say, I say at least, if there's a better path shown to me, by all means, I can take that path. But right now, this path that's in front of me, this looks like the best path to me. I don't see a better path. And I ask people that say, okay, well, there's a lot of problems in this path. You've seen a lot of Quranists coming here. Well, there's this problem, that's problem. I'm like, okay, give me your full religion so I can follow your path, right? We follow the best path. Right now, I see this as the best path. If there's a better path, then I'm more than happy to see it. So this is the way I see it. This is how I see it right now, right? I'm not locked in for life. I'm on this path right now. Say, Cho, you have a better path for me. Okay, I take your path. But until that point, this is the path that I'm going with. Does that make sense, bro?
Oh, what are they doing? What are they saying in chat, man? Just chatting stuff. But
We're talking smack.
honestly, I feel like in regards to the truth and the right path, I feel like it's ultimately up to God's will to basically guide us to that path. And if everything pans out, we should be on the same path if we were both guided, right? Our beliefs, our way of following should be the same.
I agree with you 100%. That's why I don't
Yeah.
believe in 50 different like ways of prayer. I feel like there's only one way of prayer. So if we're standing in a masjid and we're facing opposite directions for a qibla, and then there's a group of people that don't even believe in qibla, and there's people laying on their backs, and there's people laying down flat, and there's people standing and sitting, like that's just not really a masjid. That's not unity. That's not what I'm seeing in the Quran for the believers. So I
Oh
believe the
yeah.
believers are united. When you see the scene at the Kaaba, you see everyone bowing and prostrating together, like it talks about in the Quran, that sense of unity is overwhelming. You know what I mean? Like it's very powerful. And this is one of the things that actually happened for Malcolm X. So he was obviously part of that sect, the crazy cult of Nation of Islam, right? But then he goes to Hajj, okay? So he goes to Hajj because for those of you who don't know, Nation of Islam is very racist. They believe that white people are devils incarnate, and they're very racist against white people. They believe that every generation there's a new person that comes. His name is Allah, and it's God in manifestation. Some crazy beliefs, right? So then they don't believe in white people even having a right to exist. So then Malcolm X goes to Hajj, and then he sees people with blue eyes there. They're blonde, white people, Chinese people, Asian people, black people, you know, people from all over the world. He sees it, and he sees everyone's prostrating in unison at the house of God, you know, and this had such a profound impact on him that he rejected all of the Nation of Islam stuff when he came back. And we believe that he died under the age of 40, and God saved him because of this, because he died a few months before the age of 40 because he was a righteous man, and God saved him from the blasphemies that he would fall into, you know, with Sunni Islam. But this is the concept that I believe there is value in this idea of, you know, universal kind of coherence when it comes to our practices, beliefs, and worships. So I don't know what your thoughts are on this issue.
I mean, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like all I can do is try my best to understand, right? but ultimately I can't fully understand without the support of God, right? So if I'm not fully on board with Rashad and with all these, with these, I'd say every practice, then I would say it's not up to me. There's nothing I can do to further basically strengthen the belief, until I'm basically like, I will not strengthen, but like,
So what
right?
point do we just say we obey? Like, if you accept he's a messenger, say we obey and
At
trust
what,
him. Because
at what,
I agree with Katerina. She just said you sound like a very sincere person. I think that's absolutely right. And I don't know if you got a chance to read the verses that she put for
yeah,
you.
of course,
Did you read
point me
those
to the
verses,
direction of,
13 and
mm-hmm.
5:16? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the believers are.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was going to say the believers are always believers. They just get from the darkness into the light. That's what we believe for everyone. If we're believers, we're already believers. We just come from the darkness and we come into the light. That's what it is. And Rashad pushes you back on this, bro. If anyone, not just you, says Rashad is not a messenger, he says, give me one good reason. And you can read that article, and he challenges anyone. I can put it here, inshallah.
You just reminded me. Zailura, he wanted to show me evidences against like Rashad and Code 19. I haven't got the chance.
Okay.
I told him I was going to. I will probably tonight if you can.
Yeah, just do that. That's fine. You could do that later. We don't even want to talk. We don't want to spend our time here. Assalamu alaikum, Berkai. All right. So does anyone have any other questions about Quranic topics? What do you guys think about this concept that we're all believers, and even if you say you're atheist, you're not really atheist if you become a believer, because we're all believers that are guided from the darkness into the light. Does anyone have anything to say on this topic?
Just real briefly, I'd say, first of all, technically, you should say you're a submitter, and then you're not a believer technically until all doubt has been removed, and that's after going through God's purification process.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jeff. I just wasn't talking about, I'm not talking about what you call yourself. I'm just talking about what you are in terms of what God sees. And the verse about that, where it says, the Quran through the messenger brings the believers out of the darkness into the light.
MashaAllah. Yeah, that, absolutely. I mean, but it just implies, what I'm saying it's the same thing, is that you still have to be extremely humble or have a lot of humility, because you may have found this bit of information, you may have the Quran in your hand, but has it been applied? Have you gone through God's protocols? Your life will show you where you need your work. And so I don't see what's the glory of calling yourself a believer if you're really not, if you really haven't gone through the purification process.
I mean, yeah, basically, like, to call yourself a believer, you have to basically show you're a believer, right? And by doing that, you demonstrate that, okay, these practices I can do, all these things that I do. Just saying that I'm a believer means absolutely nothing if I can't, show it. Actions are just as important as making claims, right? It's saying what you are.
Exactly.
Yep.
Brother Berkai, we're in the Quran study. We just read a bunch of verses. We read in chapter 2, verses about Qibla, basically. So 136 all the way to 145 is the verses we read. I'm sorry, 153 actually. And did anyone have any questions about the facing the direction of prayer or the sacred masjid? I know that's kind of a controversial subject, but I feel like there is a lot of value in doing the prayer in the direction, because if you have people praying in different directions, that's going to be problematic.
Well, here in North America, I don't know, maybe everyone doesn't realize this around the world, that here the Sunni and Shia, they would pray towards the northeast. And then when Dr. Khalifa showed us the direction of prayer, it was a direction, not the shortest distance. So it was to the southeast. And so to me, it's just the obedience. I mean, it just illustrates whether the obedience, that's my feeling. It's like, it's a test.
So, and that's interesting you mentioned that, Jeff. It's true that vast majority of Muslims in the U.S. pray northeast, but what's interesting is that Azhar, the top Islamic university and scholarship in the world, located in Egypt, they actually issued a fatwa regarding this topic. They say, without a doubt, from the United States, it's south of east, consistent with what Rashad teaches. And it's actually not even the shortest distance, that one. That's only if you want to go through over the earth. But we know our soul doesn't need to go over the earth. It can go through mountains